Ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha. Before we get started, I have to say I'd considered not even posting this video. I'd almost decided to simply leave off as it felt a little too much like picking on a specific person and would feel a little bit unfair, given I had time to consider and weigh my arguments and the recipient of this has no real way to defend themselves or their viewpoints against my statements. That was, at least, until Digital Studios issued a false DMCA takedown of one of my videos. Now, this made me realize how wrong I was to not say anything in response to a comment such as this. So, taking that into consideration, I decided to follow through, as the commenter in question is simply, and I apologize for putting it so bluntly, but simply wrong on every level and by every definition of the word. And to not at least attempt to argue against such sideways logic is to allow ignorance to spread. And that I simply could not do. You see, this person was defending the likes of James Romine, the developer from Digital Homicide that has been pursuing a lawsuit against fellow YouTuber Jim Sterling. That in and of itself is not anything wrong. Everyone is open to their own opinions, and I do prefer that people should feel they can share those opinions safely on my channel. Although it is how those arguments were made that I actually have a bit of an issue with. And these statements also hold true for Digital Studios, and I could easily see this person defending the likes of them and their ilk as well based on what he said. Now, that said, as many of my subscribers know, I do read the comments on my videos. The majority of my active subscribers are extremely informative and insightful people. They point out when something is wrong and reinforce what it is that I've been doing correct. This channel would be nowhere without their support, and I thank my lucky stars every day for their existence. That said, every once in a while you get a troll or some form of individual that disagrees with what I have to say. Some have done so in logical and insightful ways, and many of those I had engaged in an intelligent discourse with. Sometimes they'd even swayed my opinion on a certain topic. Other times they corrected me when I had spoken falsely, and on those rare occasions I made it abundantly clear to my viewership that I had relayed incorrect information and took every step possible to rectify the situation. Then there was the time I had a troll comment on more than one video, literally telling me to kill myself. Now, instead of getting angry or upset, I instead took it as a mark of pride. I was finally a legitimate YouTuber. Someone actually hated my channel enough to wish me dead, and I have to say, that person I did engage with, and unfortunately it was quickly made apparent that in the battle of wits and intellect, the poor soul had obviously brought a knife to a gunfight, and after wearing the unfortunate person's sanity down nearly to non-existence, he finally sleeked away in defeat. And then there are people like the commenter that is the focus of this discussion, playing likey a Meng. Now, this person and people like them are so filled with a complete and utter misunderstanding and absolute detachment from every facet of reality in regards to this particular situation that it actually boggles my mind a little bit. And this will take a fair amount of time to break down in order to discuss and clarify. But before I do, I would like to read through this misguided soul's comment in its entirety. Now, he says, "Still don't understand how the guy who makes worthless vids for a living and wants Patreon monthly payment to do so has some kind of problem with a man selling 25-cent garbage on Steam. And asset flips are tools for sale for devs to add to their games. Completely legit. Some of the sprites used are so obscure that no way anyone in hell would recognize them, yet we have tarred fuck rabble-rousing gamers searching these asset flips out to shame hobbyist-level devs. I have, within the last few years, bought myself ClickTeam Fusion 2.5, Sonar, Spriter, Asaprite, and have for months on end experimented with making some hobbyist-level games. I look at what Digital Homicide has produced and tried to sell for the cost of a gumball machine gumball, and know that I would have some issues trying to do the same. I'm a noob at game dev. Yet I look at what Sterling has produced and know that I can easily do that with the time and effort involved, a few hours. So while I think the lawsuit isn't going to win for Digital Homicide, I can't blame the guy for being angry to the point to willfully drag Jim through it. Sterling and his ilk talk about the Steam store space as some holy grail of quality that has been reduced to wastelands of garbage rather than saying that a boutique has turned into a warehouse. Much like everything else in today's emotional PC culture, Digital Homicide has been demonized due to his anger and poor reactions, and not the substance of his anger. Don't like the man's games? Don't buy them. Don't like Steam turning into a warehouse with all products rather than a boutique with only the best? Well, boo-hoo, that's capitalism for you. Think you are the vigilante fighting warrior fighting the hobbyist little guy dev for Steam quality control? Go fuck off. And of course, all this spawns vids like this one I'm commenting on that just spew emotional garbage. Boo-hoo, this man is trying to rip you off for a whole quarter. Hey SidAlpha, can you make a Wyatt Derp game? Or just useless commentary vids with your brain deadly playing some gay-ass action game in the background? So, yeah, that was a lot. Well, let's get started then, shall we? Leaving your absolutely atrocious grammar and inability to form a coherent or complete sentence throughout the majority of your comment, we will start at the beginning. Still don't understand how the guy who makes worthless vids for a living and wants Patreon monthly payment to do so has some kind of problem with a man selling 25-cent garbage on Steam. Now, this is a difference that should be obvious to essentially anyone on the entire planet. The quote-unquote 25-cent content on Steam is a requirement. It is a payment for goods. Money is being exchanged in return for a product, and in return, it is perfectly acceptable for the consumer to have certain expectations of that product. For example, a reasonable expectation that the game will run without crashing or without significant bugs. Of course, expectations on the amount of content, level of graphical quality, and playable time will be scaled based on price. I do not expect a $10 game to have AAA graphics or 70 to 100 hours worth of gameplay. Nor would I hold a $1 title to the same level of expectation as I would a $10 title. To do so would be a false equivalency and would be unfair to the game developer to set such an unrealistic expectation on the game. Now, the person making worthless vids on YouTube and expecting money on Patreon every month, as you so adroitly put it, is not exchanging money for goods. It is not a sale. People are not purchasing the YouTuber's content. This is a donation and is completely and unequivocally optional by every definition. There is no paywall or monetary barrier to entry for viewing a YouTuber's content. And whether you donate money on Patreon or not, you are getting the same videos as everyone else. It is voluntary, completely optional, and is not required in any way. Again, this is a false equivalency that I would expect from a defender of the likes of James Romine. Indeed, this nearly identically mirrors an argument that James Romine made when confronting Jim Sterling during a Skype conversation the two had. Also, it's worth noting that the Slaughtering Grounds, when this whole mess got started, was a $10 title on Steam, not the 25 cents that you are thinking of. Next, the commenter states, asset flips are tools for sale for devs to add to their games. Completely legit. Now, this is not only a misunderstanding of what an asset flip is, it is also a misunderstanding of what gamers expect from the content that they consume. Just so we're clear, an asset flip can take a couple of different forms. First, we have those like Digital Studios and their ilk, who simply purchase a pre-made Unity asset bundle and then churn around and attempt to get the game onto Steam's storefront, having made absolutely zero effort whatsoever and making zero modifications to the original package. Then we also have the Digital Homicide variant, who mix things up by sometimes performing the same stunt as Digital Studios in regard to posting unmodified assets, as well as use a mashup of different pre-purchased assets that are thrown together with no form of internal consistency or cohesion. Both are as little as possible effort in order to make pure profit in as little amount of time. Indeed, asset flippers came about from the term house flipper, where one would purchase a house, spend a certain amount of money on improvements, and then flip the house for much more than they purchased it for and invested into it. It's worth noting that requires far more effort and investment of time and money than any asset flipper of video games would ever be willing or capable of. The commenter continues with, asset flips are tools for sale for devs to add to their games. Completely legit, as stated above. Now, some of the sprites used are so obscure that no way anyone in hell would recognize them, yet we have tarred fuck rabble-rousing gamers searching for these asset flips out to shame hobbyist-level devs. I have, within the last few years, bought myself Click Team Fusion 2.5, Sonar, Spriter, Asaprite. I'm assuming it's Asaprite, but I have no way of knowing for sure, and have for months on end experimented with making some hobbyist-level games. I look at what Digital Homicide has produced and tried to sell for the cost of a gumball machine gumball, and know that I would have some issue trying to do the same. I'm a noob at game dev. Yet I look at what Sterling has produced and I know that I can easily do that with the time and effort involved, a few hours. And here, for the first part of the statement at least, the commenter is correct. Assets from the Unity Asset Store are tools for devs to use and are completely legally legitimate. And then he continues on to completely and utterly miss the point. These tard-fuck rabble-rousing gamers, as you so adroitly put it, and good luck selling any of your games if you refer to your consumers as tard-fucks. So these tard-fuck rabble-rousing gamers aren't on the lookout for asset flips in the strictest sense of the term as you seem to think. What they are on the lookout for is direct asset flips like the Dentola Studios 6-pack that is busy getting its way vote-botted through the Steam Greenlight system. They're also on the lookout for disgusting mashups of the zero-effort variety such as Digital Homicide had put out, or the 15 minutes of gameplay such as Bloody Boobs, or the 12 minutes of gameplay that I had seen for other $10 titles on Steam. You see, these are the intelligent and discerning gamers that want to purchase games that have actual thought and effort put into them, and they help curate the completely broken Steam Greenlight system to help weed out some of the chaff so that it's easier for people to find games from indie devs that are actual quality who do put out genuine effort into their titles. And the reason why they do this is because no one else seems willing to. And just so we're clear, producing videos on YouTube has far more that goes into it than simply sitting in front of a microphone and talking. It takes a certain amount of intellect, a predilection or desire to entertain others, a fair amount of charisma, and a plethora of video, audio, and photo editing skills that one must master or be eaten alive by the viewing populace on this site. And take it from someone who knows. Rising from the obscure lower ranks of YouTube takes talent. It takes skill, and indeed a certain amount of luck. But once one gets there, they have to be able to live up to the expectations of a larger channel, something I am learning myself. I'm not nearly to the level of channels the size of Jim Sterling's, but I am aiming for it, and that takes far more skill than you seem to assume. He goes on to say, Sterling and his ilk talk about the Steam store space as some holy grail of quality that has been reduced to wastelands of garbage, rather than saying that a boutique has turned into a warehouse. Again, this harkens back to simple curation. 40% of all titles currently on Steam were released in 2016, and in that giant flood of games, the vast quantity of zero or ultra-low effort asset flip titles makes it virtually impossible for people to find worthwhile games, to find those passion project gems or those lazy afternoon games that are still of decent quality. Instead, they have to sift through a miasma of shit the size of Mount fucking Everest to be able to find something worthwhile. Not to mention the gamers that get duped by these no-talent asset flip clowns and end up spending money on a game that they are completely and utterly dissatisfied with. You see, gamers don't want to give their money to people that did not invest any time into the product that they are peddling. Now, I won't even go through Meng's defense of James Romine directly, as that conversation has been done to death, and if he simply doesn't understand by now how or why James Romine is an amoral piece of shit, then he most likely never will. But Meng's final argument was this, and of course, all this spawns vids like this one I'm commenting on that just spew emotional garbage. Boo-hoo, this man just trying to rip you off for a whole quarter. Hey, SidAlpha, can you make a Wyatt Derp game? Or just useless commentary vids with you brain-deadly playing some gay-ass action game in the background? Now this is the most commonly used false equivalency that these... How did Jim Sterling put it? Oh, yes. These shite-hawk asset flippers use in some form of attempted superiority. However, it is completely and utterly fallacious, and given the tone, it almost makes me wonder if Meng isn't in fact James Romine. You see, games developers are different from games critics, just as sports commentators typically are not coaches, referees, or even ball players. But that might actually be an incorrect analogy as well. Let's take this into a more direct and apt comparison. If one walks into a restaurant and orders a dish, they don't have to know how to make it to know that it tastes like ass. One doesn't need to be a 4-star chef to be a food critic. Conversely, one doesn't have to be a game developer to be a gaming critic. The jobs are completely separate and mutually exclusive to each other. It is the job of the developer to create the product. It is the job of the critic to tell people whether it is good or bad in their opinion, and it is a job that most critics take with the utmost seriousness. I can personally attest that it isn't all fun and games. It is a very real responsibility. Indeed, Total Biscuit himself recently discussed on a SoundCloud posting sentiments that mirror what I have been saying on my channel for over a year. And that is that when you critique a game, you have to be very careful. People can and do make decisions based upon your presentation of the game and your own subjective opinions that you form on that game. Even channels as small as mine are not immune to this responsibility, and the reality of the situation most certainly isn't for everyone. For someone such as me, who is unaccustomed to having a larger audience, it can generate a certain amount of fear about the statements I make and the decisions I make based upon the video games that I am critiquing. And to be honest, I hope that fear never completely goes away. It is because I have that very real concern over how my attitudes and statements can affect a game's sales that I know I'm doing the right thing, that I'm not going off half-cocked, as it were, and that I do care very much about the effect my voice has. So I do indeed take my role as a games critic very seriously, and you're alluding that this job is easy or can be done by anyone I actually find highly offensive. Of course, I realize that was in fact your point all along. But that offensive statement itself shows, as does so much of the rest of your comments, that you have no grasp on what it means to consider the consumer first and foremost, or what it is to attempt to create a quality product as a games developer. You see, dear viewer, Meng's statements are every bit as anti-consumer and lacking in morality as anything James Romine has ever done. His statements that these are quote-unquote hobbyist-level games developers and bemoans the fact that their products are being called out for being crap. You see, Steam or any other digital storefront should not accept hobbyist-level games, as they are more often than not broken messes that have no business charging people money for their creation. They are, by their definition, hobbies. When one gets good enough at their hobby, then perhaps they can turn around and sell it as a product. The term get good springs to mind in relation to these games and their developers to a certain extent. And selling a video game should have a certain expectation and standard placed upon it. It should be a complete experience with a beginning, middle, and end. It should actually fucking run, which hasn't always been the case. It should not crash. It should have some form of internal consistency. It should be entertaining to at least someone, and it should be an original work of production. Also, and I'm surprised I have to make this distinction, but as a game improves in mechanics, graphics, and story, the more they should be able to charge for it. But people like James Romine, Dentola Studios, or our commenter Meng here simply cannot comprehend that. They are completely incapable of understanding why people would not want to purchase zero-effort and bottom-of-the-barrel content for any price, even the cost of a gumball, because without standards, without games being weighed and measured, the overall quality of what we can expect for our hard-earned money goes down. And not everyone has a fair amount of disposable income, and games are, by and large, an expensive form of entertainment. And while Meng here might say, boo-hoo, they ripped me off for a quarter in response to my video, all he is doing is underscoring just how anti-consumer, selfish, and self-serving of a person he is. And of course, that is precisely what we can expect from what I would guess is a James Romine fanboy. And many of you have seen a good number of my discussion videos such as these. They cover a wide array of topics that include a great many things that are wrong with the games industry today. And if you haven't, then I suggest you do so. But one of the largest concerns I have in regards to the outcome of the James Romine lawsuit and the mentality of people like Playing Like Ia Meng here is their desire for critics and critique to go away. They would simply wish that people like myself simply vanish from the face of the earth. And why wouldn't they? If people like Total Biscuit, Jim Sterling, and to a lesser degree myself were to disappear, then they would be free and clear to sell whatever crap they want for however much money they want, and we would be thrust purely into a caveat emptor market system. Let the buyer beware. Which is something that critics help to provide consumers insulation against. We create a buffer between the consumer and the product, allowing the consumer to have far more information than they would otherwise have access to. Make no mistake, critics make this industry better. We serve the consumer in such a way that allows them to avoid games like Bloody Boobs or Dentola Studios' asset flip titles or Digital Homicide's cavalcade of bullshit that they had attempted to flood Steam's greenlight system with. But what do I know? I'm sure Meng would simply label this video as me crying impotently, painting the picture of me mewling like a tired, hungry baby, and that's fine. I've seen Meng's type before. I've seen it in Digital Homicide, and we're seeing it yet again in Dentola Studios and their unlawful takedown of my video in order to attempt to silence criticism of their heinous and unforgivable attempt at duping consumers. But I don't want to live in an echo chamber, so do let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I'm sure you all know by now, and this video is evidence that I do indeed read my comments, even if I can't respond to every single one. And while you're at it, don't forget to drop a like and share on this video if you enjoyed what I had to say. And if you're new to the channel, then please do remember to subscribe. We are growing in numbers rapidly, and every subscription to the channel helps just that much more. Thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I know it was a bit on the long side, and while I know that some of you, as you've said again by the comments, could listen to me read the phone book and be entertained, but these type of essay form videos are a bit of an indulgence for me. It allows me to flex my intellectual muscles a little bit and provides the added benefit of stroking my giant ego at the same time. I try not to make too many of these, but I think you'll understand, given the subject matter, why I felt it was important. So I'll leave you with that. Once again, I am SidAlpha, and I will see you next time.